This is a recap of the slides that I showed at the annual general meeting on the 29th of October for the Liberton Association. So I just wanted to go back over these points and to point out a few extra things which may be of use to people. When I was approaching retirement, I decided to look at how I would improve the energy efficiency of our home before I retired, because I knew I would be on a reduced income compared to when I was working full time. And the three things I identified as being important were heating your home. So in other words, making the heating of your home as efficient as possible. And the advice I originally received were that since I had a gas condensing combi boiler, to get it serviced regularly, which I already did, and in particular on advice from an energy performance specialist, to adjust its flow temperature. You may have seen some of this in the news recently. It turns out that a lot of these boilers work much more efficiently if the flow temperature of the water going to the radiators is reduced to something like 50 to 55 degrees centigrade, rather than the control being set at something like 70 degrees, which it often is on many people's boiler. The analogy I was given for this was that if you race your car up to 70 or 80 miles an hour and then down to 30 miles an hour, and then you race it up to 70 miles an hour and down to 30 miles an hour, you use more petrol than you would if you drove at a consistent 55 miles per hour. And the same thing is true of the boiler. If you let the boiler work at a lower flow temperature for a longer period of time, then it's far more efficient in terms of its use of gas and of heating of water to go around the radiators or elsewhere. The second thing I was told was to get installed and to use central heating controls within the house. Now that means basically having a room thermostat, but also there are other controls you can use, including an external temperature sensor, which can control the way the boiler performs depending on the exterior temperature outside the house, which can influence how the boiler should be used. I've particularly found it useful to have the smart meters and smart thermostats, smart thermostats I'm yet to get installed, but I have smart meters in the house now, and a small monitor which tells me how much gas or electricity I'm using on a hour by hour basis, so I can work out what is energy efficient and what is not. So those things are ways of improving the efficiency of the heating system in your home, your existing system. And then I think the most important thing is reducing home heat loss. One of the major problems with houses in the United Kingdom is that they are very badly insulated generally, mainly because they weren't built to high enough standards when they were built, and because of their age and design and construction. So insulation in particular of the roof or the loft and the walls and the floor can make dramatic differences to the loss of heat from the house, because if you think about it, if you're spending money on heating the house, you really don't want that heat to be lost immediately because your house is badly insulated. That's just pouring money down the drain. And another way of doing that is to improve draft proofing, and that is a very cost efficient way of reducing your heat loss from the house. Cracks in floors, in between skirting boards and walls, where pipe work enters or leaves the house, all those gaps allow basically the warm air that's inside your house to exit to the cold air, because wherever there is a gap, then warm air will move to the outside, and so you're basically wasting money by heating the world outside your house rather than inside your house. So draft proofing and insulation, I think, is absolutely essential to reducing your bills, but also actually just not waste, also just not wasting the heat and the money that you're spending on trying to keep warm. And I think one other consideration is when you're buying new appliances, in particular. If you have an aging gas boiler now that's probably more than 10 or 15 years old, then it probably isn't an A-rated boiler. The best sort of gas boiler to get would be a condensing gas boiler, which are slightly more expensive than other types of boiler, but the savings that you make in terms of the expenditure are significant in the long term. The other thing you can do is move from gas heating to a heat pump mechanism, and those come in two forms: of air source heat pump, which are relatively easy and relatively less expensive to install compared to a ground source heat pump, which is really for people who have a lot of land outside their houses and can afford to bury pipe work in their surrounding land. Air source heat pumps work on the principle of basically a reverse fridge. In other words, they keep the house warm and the outside cool, rather than the way a fridge works, where it keeps the inside cool and the outside warm. And they are quite efficient. They generate about 3 kilowatts of heat for every 1 kilowatt of electricity they use, so they can be at least as efficient as a gas boiler. At least the most recent models are. Appliances that are bought to replace washing machines, tumble dryers, dishwashers, etc. If you pick an appliance that's A-rated, then it will save you £80 to £200 annually in terms of energy costs, compared to a really inefficient appliance rated as G. Obviously, that's a sliding scale, but the expense of paying slightly more for an appliance may in the long term be better than buying something which is a high energy user but cheaper. I've also gradually replaced in our house all the existing lighting systems with LED light bulbs, which are very long lasting and extremely low energy consumption, and that has all helped to reduce our bills. Loft insulation is a very easy way of saving money and keeping your house warm. Loft insulation, depending on the property that you have, will cost, for what is regarded as the recommended amount of loft insulation these days, of 27 centimetres, just short of a foot, between £450 and £650, depending on the size of your property. If you have no insulation in your loft, then you will immediately save almost as much money as the cost of installation in the first year that you install it. Increasing your insulation from what used to be the standard of sort of 12 centimetres, 4 inches, up to the sort of current recommendations of just 27 centimetres, or just short of a foot, will make some savings, but obviously those savings will be smaller than they would be otherwise, and are still quite considerable. In this respect, you can do it yourself for about between £3 and £5 per square metre in your loft, although it's a fairly unpleasant job. You should always wear a mask when handling fiberglass insulation, because it's dangerous for your lungs, and you can be incredibly itchy for several hours after doing the procedure. Best to wear a disposable overall if you can. However, you can get it fitted. As I say, these costs in the graph here are basically costs for having it professionally fitted. Home Energy Scotland, which is a government organisation, provides loans towards doing this, but these loans include a cashback component. So for loft, floor or cavity wall insulation, sorry, I've said up to £1,000. Yeah, so loft, floor or cavity wall insulation, up to £1,000 can be loaned at 0% from Home Energy Scotland, and basically, of that £1,000, you only need to pay back £600, £400 of that loan is cash back, and that's the cap. The cap is £1,000 on that loan. If you have flat roofs or room-in roofs, in other words, bedrooms that are in the roof space, you can get up to £4,000 0% loan on that, and again you get a 40% cash back on that loan. So really, if you need to do those sort of things, applying for the loan is an obvious option. Cavity wall insulation is another way of insulating your house, because something like 25 to 30% of the heat in your house can be lost through the walls. If you have cavity walls, if you have solid walls, the situation is a bit more complicated, but solid walls can be insulated too, but it does cost more. So the cost of cavity wall insulation varies from a mid-floor flat, about £400-500, to about £1,800 for a detached house. But the savings on energy use are quite considerable, and usually will be recouped within 2 to 3 years of having the insulation fitted. Again, there's a 0% loan to do this through Home Energy Scotland, up to £1,000 at least, so there's a cap of £1,000 on the amount they will loan you. And again, this has 40% cash back, so if you borrow £1,000, then you only pay back £600. Another useful scheme from Home Energy Scotland. The most cost-effective way of reducing heat loss from a home is basically to do some of the simpler things to reduce drafts and heat loss. A chimney draft excluder, if you don't use your chimney, or you very rarely use your chimney. Many people have a gas fire, but it's something that's more decorative than used for heating. A lot of heat can be lost up a chimney, especially in the winter when because of the through draft. So it's possible to use something called a balloon, a chimney balloon, or a chimney sheep. The chimney sheep is made from wool, hence the name chimney sheep. And this is something that basically just blocks the chimney to stop warm air heading up the chimney and out of the house. The chimney sheep is a wool-based device for blocking the chimney, which at least allows a small amount of air through to stop the chimney from getting damp. The chimney balloons are basically a balloon that you inflate inside the chimney to block the air out, and of course that can trap the air in the chimney, and in some cases you can get a little bit of dampness. Double glazing is relatively expensive, as this graph is shown with a split axis, because the cost of double glazing is something like £6,000 to £12,000, depending on whether you go for double or triple glazing. The savings per year are going to be around about £200 to £250 per year. But windows are a significant source of heat loss, and again, even if you do have double glazing or triple glazing or even single glazing, draft proofing those windows using brush strips or foam strips will significantly reduce heat loss from those windows, and it's relatively inexpensive to do. And the most amazing thing in terms of heat loss, as I said, is to fill gaps in skirting boards, floors, holes where pipes come through your floor. Blocking those gaps with silicone or sealant or decorator's caulk or expanding foam will dramatically reduce warm air loss through those cavities, those which are basically holes between your house and the external environment, and that can save you well over £100 a year in terms of energy costs, and of course also provide a more comfortable environment in the house. So just to finish, I was going to show you, I opted for this system in our house, which is a spray foam insulation system in the loft and under the floor, which was a more expensive system to have fitted. For our house, which is a 3-bedroom detached house with bedrooms that are room in roof, it cost about £5,800. But I got 40% cash back on both the room in roof and the underfloor insulation, so I got something like £1,900 cash back for fitting this material to the house. This spray foam insulation is an open foam insulation. It's sprayed between the joists. It's breathable, so you don't get a condensation problem in the loft, but what it basically does is seal the house against heat loss. And I've had this done in the roof, so basically now I don't get any heat loss from the loft. I also have glass fibre insulation below the boards in the loft, so it's sort of doubly insulated there. But that's stuff I did a few years ago. And you can fit this in any eaves you have as well, and it can be fitted in the gaps between the bedrooms and the roof where you've got a small gap. It can be sprayed into those gaps as well. It sets quite quickly. It's relatively odorless, although the first couple of days there can be a bit of a smell, and with a bit of opening of windows that tends to go quite quickly. I've found it quite effective, and this is a photograph under the floor. So there you can see the sort of dwarf walls under the floor that support the joists of the flooring, and the spray foam is sprayed upwards in between the joists. And that's been very effective in my house because it stopped all the drafts underneath the floors where pipe work penetrated the floors, and so I've virtually eliminated drafts below the floor as a result of that. We have mainly wooden floors in our house, so those are now quite comfortable to walk on rather than the more chilly way they used to be in the winter. To finish off, there is financial help and advice available, again from Home Energy Scotland, which is a Scottish government organisation. There are a number of financial assistance packages. So child winter heating assistance is if you're responsible for the care of a disabled child or a child that has other needs. There's payments that can be made for extra heating that may be needed for a child, such as that. There's warm home discounts, winter heating payments, winter fuel payments, and of course we're getting a council tax rebate to help with the costs of heating this winter. And an organisation called Advice Direct Scotland, all of whom can provide advice on what sort of financial help are available to people in different circumstances. And those benefits are available to people depending on their circumstances. If you have a disability benefit or a personal independence payment or other pension credit, for example, then some of these schemes are open to people in those circumstances. The telephone number for Home Energy Scotland is shown on the slide here. There is an email address which I don't have to hand at the moment. As I say, even if you don't have access to these discounted or payments or grants, the Home Energy Scotland loan system is in place for anyone basically who's eligible, and that's most people. These are 0% finance loans, some of which, as I say, get between 40 and 75% cash back. So insulation is about 40% cash back. Various other loans that are provided for also provide cash back. The 75% cash back, I think at the moment, only applies to air source heat pumps and is capped at £10,000. So in other words, if your heat pump costs more than 10,000, you wouldn't get any more loan than 10,000. But that does mean you get £7,500 off the cost of fitting an air source heat pump as a result. The Warmer Home Scotland scheme in particular is to deal with poorly heated homes, and in particular is available to people who are over 75 and are in receipt of a number of different benefits. In particular, if you have a heating system which is no longer working, Warmer Home Scotland can deal with that and provide substantial assistance in terms of getting your home up to a standard that's comfortable. There are even some low-cost interest loans for landlords, private landlords, who have a sitting tenant at 3.5% interest rate in order to improve their properties to a suitable level, to provide a comfortable environment for tenants, which is at the moment again still a fairly attractive offer. I'm quite happy to help in any way with anybody who wishes to, who needs advice on this sort of thing. So I can be contacted through the Liberton Association website or through the Liberton Association email address that can be passed on to me. One thing to note is if you want to apply for one of these loans to improve the heat and efficiency of your house, an energy performance certificate is needed, and that's essential to apply for a Home Energy Scotland loan. It provides an energy performance assessment of your house. It recommends improvements to improve energy efficiency within your house. It usually costs between £60 and £65 for an assessment of that sort. And if you need a pre and post assessment, which you will do for if you're going to have improvements done, then you need to have an EPC produced beforehand and afterwards. I should also mention that energy performance certificates are now a legal requirement for selling your home, and I think your EPC has to be 3 years old or less in order to sell a home these days. I paid about £125 for a double assessment, a pre-improvement and a post-improvement assessment. And the gentleman who did it is a gentleman called Craig Watson. He's the assessor that assessed my house. He was a very helpful man, and he has offered to speak to anybody without charge to give them advice on how to improve the energy efficiency of their home. So his telephone number is 0795 777 2967. That's 0795 777 2967. And his email address is craigtwatson@outlook.com, so he can be emailed if you wish to contact him that way. Craig has very kindly said he would be more than happy to speak to anybody from the Liberton Association to advise them on their energy efficiency within their home. Because as he has explained to me on a number of occasions, there are a number of small incremental changes you could make which even if you don't spend a lot of money can actually improve the energy efficiency of your house quite dramatically. I'll leave that for now. That's where I'm going to finish. I hope you found these slides useful, but please contact us through the Liberton Association if you'd like more information or advice. Thanks.